Good evening. Tonight I will be discussing the 10th Amendment, which is part of the Bill of Rights. Behind me is an original copy and then a newer copy. The 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution states, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." This amendment is important because it expresses the primary principle of our system of government, federalism. Advocates of the new Constitution consistently and persistently stated to the ratifying conventions that the new government would only have the powers expressly enumerated. Congress had to tie any laws thought to be necessary and proper to one of the enumerated powers listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. In the ratifying conventions for the Constitution, anti-federalists and a few concerned federalists demanded a Bill of Rights that included a statement clarifying the limitations on the powers of the federal government. To secure ratification, James Madison and other federalists promised to make the requisite amendments if the states would vote for ratification. As promised, Madison drew up a list of amendments, one of which became the 10th, and which expressed his promise to the states that, I quote, "the general government could not exceed the expressly delegated powers," end quote. When John Marshall made his famous decision in McCulloch versus Maryland, people were concerned that his explanation of the 10th Amendment would expand the powers of the federal government. However, his controversial ruling was not used consistently by the Supreme Court to do that until the New Deal era. In 1941, the Supreme Court ruled in United States versus Darby that the 10th Amendment was just a truism, not a part of the Constitution to be used to settle cases. This may explain why they ruled against the use of the 10th Amendment in the 1942 case Wickard versus Filburn, in which the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government had the right to regulate a single farmer's wheat production that only he and a few neighbors would use. This ruling led to many federal government versus state conflicts never contemplated by the framers of the Constitution. The Supreme Court expanded the meaning of the Commerce Clause to allow Congress to regulate not just interstate commerce, but intrastate commerce. Furthermore, congressional legislation to regulate state government employees, to use state officials to enforce federal regulations, and to direct federal commands to state agencies or legislatures were all upheld by the Supreme Court in defiance of the 10th Amendment. Think, recently, No Child Left Behind or the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Under the Rehnquist Court in the 1990s, 10th Amendment cases like New York versus United States, which prevented Congress from forcing state legislatures to deal with low-level nuclear wastes, or Prince versus United States, which prevented Congress from requiring state executives from implementing federal schemes of firearm regulation, and United States versus Lopez, which stopped Congress from expanding its Commerce Clause power, all brought some limitations to the federal government, the plaintiffs citing the 10th Amendment. 10th Amendment cases have included a variety of subjects. Gun rights, one of the most important being the use of the 10th Amendment to strike down the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, but also treaty cases, or the Defense of Marriage Act. Massachusetts used the 10th Amendment to sue the federal government over the Defense of Marriage Act. Also sports betting and other intrastate and interstate commerce issues. With the exception of the Rehnquist Court, most other courts have ignored the history, meaning, and intention of the 10th Amendment. The powers of the federal government have been expanded exponentially as a result. It's time for we the people to realize that who we elect as president, who we put in the Senate, and how our law schools are teaching constitutional law are all important factors in trying to get back to limited government that allows more self-government by vigilant, educated, and virtuous people. Thank you.